The Monkey King bounded to the bridge's edge, pressed his palms together, and murmured an ancient water-parting charm. Down he plunged, and the sea itself folded open like a silk curtain, carving a clean, dry corridor straight through the blue-green depths toward the ocean's hidden floor. A patrolling Yaksha, scales glinting like wet armor, thrust his trident across the path and barked a challenge. Who comes disturbing the Dragon King's waters? Wukong only grinned and announced himself the natural-born sage of Flower Fruit Mountain, old neighbor to the Lord of the Sea. The Yaksha fled to report. Within the Crystal Palace, the old Dragon King Guang rose in haste, gathering his dragon sons, shrimp soldiers, and crab generals, and marched out to meet his guest with bowing welcomes and steaming tea served upon a throne of polished shell. Over tea the king asked when this sage had found the way. Wukong laughed and said he'd left home to cultivate a body beyond birth and death, but now his children needed guarding and he lacked a proper weapon. He'd heard the Sea King kept countless treasures and came to beg for one. The Dragon King, unable to refuse, ordered his steward to bring forth a great broadsword. Wukong weighed it in his hands, shook his head, and handed it back. He had never learned the way of the blade, he said, and begged the king to offer something else entirely. So the king commanded a 9-pronged fork, 3,600 pounds of black iron, to be hauled out by brawny eel attendants. Wukong snatched it up, spun a quick flourish, and set it down again with a sour frown. Too light, he complained, far too light for his hand. Now, truly worried, the king had his generals drag out a painted halberd weighing 7,200 pounds. Wukong caught it midair through a few dazzling forms, then jammed it into the floor. Still too light, he declared. The king confessed, trembling, that no heavier weapon remained in his palace. From behind the throne, the Dragon Queen and her daughter stepped forward and whispered that for days a certain piece of heavenly iron had been glowing and breathing light, surely meant to meet this sage. The king frowned and said it was only an old measuring peg left by the flood tamer Yu. The queen shrugged and said to give it regardless, and let him reshape it as he pleased. The king, yielding, told Wukong of the thing, but warned it could not be lifted or carried. Wukong demanded to see it at once, and the king led him deep into the sea treasury's glowing heart. There it stood, a pillar of iron throwing off 10,000 rays of gold, thick as a bushel basket and more than 2 yards long. Wukong seized it with both hands and grumbled that it was too thick, too long. The treasure hurt him and shrank several inches, slimming by a full grip. He bounced it in his palm and wished it thinner still, and again the staff obeyed. He carried it into the light and saw 2 golden bands clasping either end of a shaft of black iron, and between the band a line of small words, Rui Jingu Bang, 13,500 pounds. Delighted, Wukong murmured and bounced the treasure smaller still as he walked. Outside, it stood 2 yards long and thick as a rice bowl. Then he showed his power, whirling the staff through dazzling forms, and the whole Crystal Palace shook as dragons cowered and shrimps buried their heads. He planted the staff in his palm, sat himself upon the Dragon King's own throne, and smiled his thanks for such a generous gift. The king stammered polite denials. But Wukong went on. The weapon was fine, yet now he held it, his body lacked armor to match it. Could the king spare a set? The king insisted he had no armor to give. Wukong laughed and said one guest should not trouble 2 masters, and that without armor he would not be leaving through that gate. The king begged him to try another sea. Wukong snapped that visiting 3 houses was worse than sitting at one. When the king swore again that nothing remained, Wukong's smile turned cold. If there was truly no armor, he said, then he and the king could test this fine iron together. The Dragon King blanched and begged him not to strike, promising to ask his younger brother for a set. The old king, trembling, sent word at once to his brother dragons of the north, south, and west, begging them to gather what golden mail and phoenix-feathered